In the Belly of Crime, the Jack Henry Abbott Story. In the dim glow of a prison cell, Jack Henry Abbott wrote words that would captivate the literary world. His sentences were raw and unfiltered, capturing the brutality of the prison industrial complex and the human cost of incarceration. Yet, for all the brilliance he poured onto the page, Abbott's life is a haunting contradiction. Both a writer of reform and a man consumed by violence. This is the story of Jack Henry Abbott, an acclaimed author, a convicted murderer, and a man whose life remains a chilling commentary on the thin line between genius and destruction. To understand Jack Abbott, we must delve into his broken beginnings, his literary rise, and his devastating fall. Born on January 21, 1944, Jack Henry Abbott's life began in the shadows. Abandoned as a child, bouncing between foster homes and enduring years of instability, Abbott's early environment was a crucible for survival. By his teenage years, he found solace not in society, but chaos, committing petty crimes and landing in reformatories. The young man's life spiraled with alarming speed. By his 20s, he had graduated from small-time offenses to forgery, armed robbery, and eventually manslaughter after an altercation turned deadly. Prison became Abbott's world. He wasn't merely an inmate. He became a product of the austere, dehumanizing penal system of the mid-20th century. Yet even as the institution worked to crush him, a sliver of defiance glimmered in Abbott. In the confines of his cell, he began channeling his pain and anger into words. Abbott's writing surfaced as an act of survival, a blunt weapon against the silence of his imprisonment. Using letters and scraps of paper, he documented not only his experiences, but the experiences of others trapped in the grinding machinery of incarceration. His voice was caustic, unforgiving, and startlingly insightful. The raw edge of Abbott's prose soon attracted attention. His descriptive accounts of daily beatings, racial tensions, and unbroken isolation within the prison walls reflected a world most of society refused to acknowledge. Unflinchingly, Abbott painted prison as a slaughterhouse of the human spirit. These writings would become the seeds of In the Belly of the Beast, a memoir praised as one of the most unflinching portrayals of institutional cruelty ever written. Critics described his words as both horrifying and undeniably brilliant, but it wasn't simply his writing that tugged at the broader world's attention, it was the man himself. Enter Norman Mailer, a literary titan and outspoken advocate for second chances. Mailer, known for his fascination with the fringes of genius, stumbled upon Abbott's writings and saw not a criminal but a diamond buried beneath decades of institutional oppressions. Taking Abbott under his wing, Mailer championed the writer both in the literary world and beyond. Mailer advocated for Abbott's release, believing that beneath his criminal history lay a mind capable of reshaping narratives about the prison system. Other intellectuals and reform advocates joined Mailer, presenting Abbott as a symbol of the transformative power of art and intellect. In 1981, largely due to Mailer's lobbying efforts, Jack Henry Abbott was granted parole after serving decades behind bars. The world waited with bated breath to witness the reformation of a man who had risen from violent ashes to literary acclaim. But Jack Abbott was not the redemption story the world hoped for. Upon his release, Abbott's memoir In the Belly of the Beast gained widespread attention, further solidifying his place in the literary spotlight. The book wasn't just a recounting of the ordeals he endured, it was a harrowing analysis of the systemic brutality of incarceration. Abbott described prison life as a calculated destruction of the soul, likening himself and other inmates to the walking dead. The memoir struck chords with critics and reformers alike. Abbott was praised as a voice for the voiceless, shedding light on the unseen horrors of incarceration. His writings echoed the pain, rage, and hopelessness experienced by countless others lost in the prison system. For a brief moment, Jack Abbott, the author, eclipsed Jack Abbott, the convict. But beneath his powerful prose simmered a volcano of unresolved anger, mistrust, and violence that decades of imprisonment had failed to extinguish. Freedom proved to be a fleeting and volatile concept for Abbott. During his brief time outside prison walls, he struggled to adapt to a world that had grown unfamiliar after years of confinement. Transitioning from a prisoner to a celebrated writer ought to have been his triumph. But Jack Henry Abbott had never walked a clear and manageable path. In July of 1981, just 6 weeks after his release, Abbott's long-buried demons erupted once more. Inside a New York City cafe, a verbal dispute with a young waiter escalated into violence. Abbott stabbed the man, leaving him fatally wounded. The celebrated author was now, once again, a murderer. Public outrage was swift and relentless. A tidal wave of criticism crashed upon Abbott and, by extension, Norman Mailer, and the institutions that had believed in his rehabilitation. Was Abbott simply irredeemable? Did the intellectual intervention of Mailer and others blind them to the criminal tendencies deeply rooted in his psyche? The questions became rhetorical as Abbott was apprehended, tried, and sentenced to yet another prison term. His brief encounter with freedom was over, and his name became synonymous not with literary brilliance, but with betrayal and tragedy. Jack Henry Abbott's return to prison marked the beginning of his ultimate decline. No longer a literary darling, Abbott grew isolated and resentful. Trapped once more within the walls he had so eloquently raged against in his memoir, he spent his final years a shadow of his former self. Letters and unfinished manuscripts indicate that Abbott never truly stopped writing, but the sharp purpose that had characterized his earlier work seemed dulled. His notoriety as a criminal overshadowed his contributions as an intellectual. Alone and desperate, Abbott sank deeper into despair. The weight of his misdeeds and the crushing monotony of incarceration finally proved too much. On February 10, 2002, Jack Henry Abbott was discovered dead in his cell, having taken his own life. He was 58 years old. The life of Jack Henry Abbott defies simple categorization. Was he a brilliant, tortured soul molded by an unjust system? Or was he a man whose talent failed to outshine his deeply ingrained violence? The answer likely lies somewhere between condemnation and admiration. In the Belly of the Beast remains a vital piece of literature, drawing attention to the oppressive machinery of the prison system. Yet Abbott himself has become a chilling symbol of justice failed on multiple fronts. His story carries an undeniable weight, reminding us that genius can come from the darkest corners of humanity, but so too can danger. In the end, Jack Henry Abbott's story isn't just about one man. It is also about the intersecting forces of society, punishment, and redemption. True crime enthusiasts are left to grapple with one lingering question: can a man truly change, or do the scars of his past inevitably mark his future? Jack Henry Abbott left no answer, only an indelible, somber mark on those who dare examine his story.